Every night at 2:47 a.m., before the roosters of West Java stirred, before her neighbors rolled out of bed to stoke cooking fires or prep stalls for the market, Dewi slipped out of her mosquito-netted cot, barefoot, careful not to wake the small body curled beside her. She didn't need an alarm. Her body had been conditioned by years of scarcity to recognize the rhythm of opportunity, and it never came in broad daylight. She padded silently into the kitchen, which doubled as a study and tripled as a trading desk. Her phone's cracked screen cast a cold glow on the wooden walls. She boiled water for instant coffee, 2 spoonfuls of sugar, no cream, just enough bitterness to sharpen her senses. As the water hissed in the kettle, she opened her battered secondhand laptop. Its hinges creaked, its battery bloated, but it was her portal to another life. The MetaTrader 4 logo flickered to life like a candle in the dark. Outside, a motorbike barked in the distance. Inside, a chart of pound sterling to Japanese yen danced under the glow of a flickering LED bulb. She sipped and stared. This was her sacred hour. The London Open was still a breath away, but volatility was building like a slow tide. She could feel it in the pattern. She didn't need news, just the language of the candles, the way they pulsed and breathed. Dewi wasn't a professional trader. She didn't even call herself a trader out loud. To most, she was just a widow in her early 30s, a former garment factory worker turned warung helper, raising a 5-year-old daughter in a village that forgot the names of its own heroes. But every night, while her world slept, she became something else. A predator, a reader of patterns, a woman who decided that if no one would rescue her, she would rewrite her own script with entries and exits, risk percentages, and silent celebrations. She first discovered Forex 2 years earlier, not through some online ad or guru video, but by accident, sweeping the office of a digital agency in Jakarta during her brief stint as a cleaner. A tablet had been left unlocked, displaying a chart she mistook for a video game. When she asked the young copywriter what it was, he laughed and said, "Just gambling for smart people." But she saw something else: rhythm, movement, logic disguised as chaos. For weeks after that, she borrowed internet from the neighbor's son after his homework was done. She watched free tutorials at 144p resolution, sometimes without sound. She copied price action patterns into an old-school notebook, the kind meant for elementary math, until its pages curled from the dampness of night air. She blew a $10 demo account in 3 days, then blew another, then lasted a week, then a month, then started logging every single trade in ink. Now, after 18 months of trading on a battered demo and surviving on low-yield odd jobs, Dewi had scraped together just enough to open a $50 micro account. It wasn't much. To some, it was laughable, but to her, it was sacred. It was proof that she had endured, that she had studied, adapted, observed, and waited, that she had done the one thing most of the world around her failed to do: prepare. And this particular night, felt different. Pound sterling to Japanese yen was coiling. The Asian session had been tight, boxed in by indecision. But now, she noticed the volume shifting. The last 5-minute candle had wicked upward and closed with a strong body. She cross-checked on the 15-minute chart. Same intent. The last touch of support had been clean. The break above 188.400 wasn't explosive, but it was purposeful. This wasn't noise. She leaned in, took a breath, and opened a buy order. Only 0.01 lot size. Her entire risk, 1.2%. She didn't flinch. As price hovered in the drawdown zone, she whispered, not a prayer, but a promise. "For you, AU," she said, glancing at the adjacent room where her daughter still slept curled against a pillow that had once belonged to her late husband. The trade floated for 12 minutes, flirting with her stop-loss, testing her nerves. Her hand hovered near the mouse, not to close early, but to screenshot. She had promised herself, win or lose, every trade must be recorded, analyzed, reviewed. No emotion, no judgment, just documentation, like a scientist in a jungle. And then, just as she reached for her coffee again, the chart pulsed upward. A candle snapped to life, bullish, confident, slicing through minor resistance like a machete through sugarcane. Dewi didn't blink. She didn't celebrate. She didn't move. She simply sat, watched, and waited for her take-profit line to be kissed. When the soft ding of the closed order echoed into the silence, Her balance had grown by $1.27. To some, that amount meant nothing. But to Dewi, it meant her daughter's lunch was secured, that she was one trade closer to her goal, saving enough to leave the Warung job forever, to trade full-time, to be present in her child's life, to never depend on pity again. She logged the trade. Date, time, pair, setup, emotion rating, notes. Then, as the first light of morning crept through the thin curtain, she shut the laptop and quietly returned to bed. In 4 hours, she would rise again, not as a trader, but as a mother, helper, cook, cleaner. But she would carry a secret strength in her spine, the strength of someone who stared into the digital chaos of the global market and found, for a moment, perfect clarity. By 7:10 a.m., the rice had already finished steaming, the sambal ground, and the cart loaded with fried tofu and tempeh, hot, crisp, and trembling slightly in the morning air. Dewi stood behind the Warung's front counter, her hands moving on autopilot as customers trickled in with sleepy eyes and small change. The rhythm of the village returned in full, scooters buzzing like wasps, children dragging their backpacks, and radios blaring half-static prayer recitations mixed with pop ballads from Jakarta. To the world, Dewi was exactly what she appeared to be, a soft-spoken woman with a faint limp, whose smile came quickly but rarely reached her eyes. No one saw the charts. No one knew about the trades. She didn't speak of Forex, not because it was shameful, but because it was sacred. It belonged to the silent hours. It was hers, and hers alone. But this morning, something lingered at the edges of her thoughts. Not the candle patterns, not the dollar gain. It was the signal, the one she'd seen form on euro to US dollar just before she'd closed the laptop. It was clean, too clean to ignore. And now, standing behind the Warung's ancient wooden counter, her gut twisted not from fear, but from the feeling every trader knows well, the missed move. She gripped the ladle tighter and forced herself to smile at a regular customer, a middle-aged man with a tendency to haggle over already cheap prices. She packed his rice and tofu with robotic grace, but her mind was back at the chart. Had price broken the level? Was the breakout confirmed? Would it retest? She couldn't know. She wouldn't know. Not until the day's grind ended, and the screen could speak to her again. At 10:45 a.m., the Warung's owner arrived, a thick-necked woman named Burina who wore too much perfume and not enough patience. She walked in shouting about a delivery gone missing, barked at Dewi to clean the wok faster, and knocked over a crate of chili peppers without an apology. It wasn't new. It wasn't surprising. But that morning, for the first time, Dewi didn't flinch. She didn't shout back either. She simply wiped her hands, swept the spilled chilies into the corner, and returned to stirring the boiling oil. Calm, detached, focused. Because deep down, she knew something had shifted. Not in Burina, but in herself. That night, after Au was bathed and tucked in, Dewi sat by the window with her laptop and opened the chart. Euro to US dollar had exploded upward, just as she'd suspected. A textbook breakout. Her setup had been perfect. Entry, stop, target, everything she'd mapped earlier in her notebook had played out almost exactly. The move would have yielded $2.63. Enough for 3 meals. Maybe a school workbook. She stared at the candle that marked the entry she never took. She didn't feel regret. She felt hunger. A hunger not just for profit, but for autonomy, for time, for choice. She opened her notebook. Wrote, missed signal. Correct read. Missed opportunity due to time constraint. Emotion, frustration, controlled. Then she closed her eyes, and for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to ask a question that had haunted her silently. What if I left the Warung? The idea felt wild, reckless, impossible, but it had started to bloom. A calculation, unspoken until now, was forming in the back of her mind. How much capital would she need to replace her monthly income? How much time would it take? Could she scale without blowing the account? She didn't answer yet. She knew better than to act on emotion, but the seed had been planted. The next day, Burina screamed at her again, this time about a stain on a tablecloth. Dewi didn't respond. She simply cleaned it and made a mental note. 5 more trades. 5 clean setups. If I hit 4 out of 5, I'll make the decision. And so the test began. Over the following nights, she traded like a surgeon, precise, disciplined, emotionless. Her daughter's tiny breaths from the next room were the metronome of her focus. Her rules were carved in stone. 1 trade per night. No revenge. Always a written journal. Every candle, a conversation. The results. Trade 1, win, $1.48. Trade 2, loss, minus 87 cents. Trade 3, win, $1.92. Trade 4, win, $1.34. Trade 5, win, $2.01. She stared at the final entry, her hands trembling slightly. Not from excitement, from clarity. 4 out of 5. Clean, controlled, profitable. Her mind turned to the Warong, to the missed signals, to the spilled chilies. And for the first time, she no longer asked what if. She asked when. She waited until the day ended. Not out of fear, but respect. For finality. For rhythm. For the last time, Dewi wiped down the counter, stacked the trays, folded the plastic chairs, and tied the trash without being told. She handed the keys to Burina with both hands in a shallow bow. The kind you give not out of subservience, but tradition. No speeches, no explanation. Just a quiet, steady, Saya Bereni boo. I quit. Burina stared at her as if someone had spoken in code. Apa Max Sudmu Bereni? What do you mean, quit? Dewi repeated it, calmly, firmly. Saya tidak akan kembali lagi. Terima kasih atas semua. I won't come back again. Thank you for everything. The Warung owner scoffed, more confused than angry. What will you do? Sell shoes on Instagram? Open a fried banana stall? You think the world waits for widows with no money? Dewi smiled faintly, not mocking, not smug, just assured. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. She walked out, the late afternoon sun cutting sharp angles across the dusty road. Her apron felt lighter, her spine straighter. As she stepped over a crack in the pavement, she realized something strange. She wasn't afraid. Not even a flicker. The fear, the trembling, the what-ifs, they were gone. Left behind with the chilly stains and the condescension. That night, as Ayu played with a paper doll made from old food wrappers, Dewi set up her laptop on the small dining table. This time, she didn't trade immediately. She stared at the charts like they were mirrors, reflections of something inside her shifting into form. She reviewed her setups, scrolled through her trading journal, and then opened a spreadsheet titled Survival Budget. The numbers were brutal, but clear. If she earned just $3 a day, net, after losses, she could keep the roof, feed Ayu, and cover school costs. Not luxury, not comfort, but dignity, autonomy, freedom. She exhaled, slow and controlled. We start now. Over the next week, Dewi created a schedule. Wake at 2:30 a.m. trade until 5. Sleep until 7. Prep Ayu for school. Do house chores. Backtest from noon to 2. Sleep from 3 to 6. Then dinner, bedtime, and chart review. It was brutal, but she was used to hardship. Only now, the hardship served a vision, not someone else's pocket. She journaled every trade, marked every mistake, and rewatched old YouTube breakdowns she had saved offline months earlier. She even printed screenshots of perfect setups and taped them above the sink, beside the rice cooker, next to the mirror. Trading was no longer an escape. It was a discipline. And then came the loss streak. 3 trades, 3 clean setups, 3 precise entries. All failed. Minus 78 cents. Minus $1.21. Minus $1.35. Small amounts. But in Dewi's world, they echoed loud. On the 3rd loss, she didn't cry. She didn't slam the laptop. She didn't curse the market. She opened her journal, noted the trade, marked the difference between error and randomness, and then, as always, wrote a final sentence. Emotion, controlled. But it shook her. Not because she'd lost money, she had budgeted for risk, but because the silence that followed sounded like doubt. That evening, Ayu walked in carrying a crumpled envelope from school. A notice, field trip fee, 30,000 rupiah, due next week. The equivalent of 2 days of trading success. Dewi stared at the paper, her stomach tightening. She had a choice, tighten risk and stretch the week, or push harder and take another trade that night. She opened the charts. The setup was forming. Euro/NZD, one of her least favorite pairs. Wild, impulsive, unforgiving. But the double bottom on the 15-minute chart was undeniable. The candles were showing intent. Volume rising. London open approaching. She whispered to herself, "Discipline first. Never force. Trade what's there." She placed the order. Tight stop. Small size. Risk 0.9%. Target 2.5%. Then she waited. It hovered in drawdown. Ticked close to the stop. Teased her with indecision. She wanted to close. She wanted to walk away. But she didn't. She folded AU's field trip paper into her notebook and muttered under her breath. Not greed. Not fear. Just trade. And then the candle broke. Exploded. A clean, fast, bullish, engulfing candle, like a pulse of light from the sky. Her take profit hit within 8 minutes. Plus $2.67. She stared at it for a moment, blank. Then she laughed. Softly. Not because of the money. Because she'd kept her word. To herself. To the market. To her daughter. It began as a whisper. A ping on her outdated Gmail account. The kind she used mostly for registering free trials and downloading PDFs from trading blogs that were too advanced for her 2 years ago. The subject line was simple. Keep writing. Dewi nearly deleted it, assuming spam. But something about the tone of the preview text caught her attention. "I don't know who you are, but your latest post about the Euro/NZD trade made me stay up all night." She opened it. The email was from someone named Elijah Romer. The name meant nothing. The words did. Elijah wrote like someone who didn't expect to be heard, yet couldn't stop speaking. He said he'd stumbled across Dewi's trading blog, hosted for free on an old WordPress template with no SEO, no pictures, and a domain that still had the .wordpress.com suffix. She had made the site for herself, never advertised it, never linked it on social media. Just a place to dump thoughts, track her growth, and write what she couldn't say aloud. He said he wasn't a guru, just a trader. Tired, burned out, blown accounts, broken sleep cycles, and too many signals without conviction. But then he read her journal entry from the $2.67 win, and something shifted. "You reminded me that this is more than leverage and patterns. You made the market feel like a mirror again, not a war zone." Dewi sat frozen in her chair, staring at the screen long after the laptop's fan began to hum. No one had ever responded to her writing before. She hadn't even known anyone was reading. She replied cautiously, thanked him, said she wasn't a teacher, didn't offer mentorship, didn't sell courses, just trades, just thoughts. He wrote back the same night, and the next, and again. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't a hustle. Just two people from wildly different corners of the earth. He from Frankfurt, she from rural West Java, speaking the same quiet language of late-night charts and lonely conviction. He asked if she'd ever thought of joining a prop firm. She laughed, softly, almost bitterly. "I have $39.84 in my account. I think the prop firms can wait." But Elijah didn't let it go. He explained that many firms now offer low-cost evaluation phases, and some even have demo contests with real payouts. "You're better than you think," he wrote, "and far more consistent than most traders I know." That night, after AU was asleep and the dishes were washed, Dewi stared at her trading spreadsheet. 37 days of activity. 29 green. Average win, $1.63. Average loss, 91 cents. Our multiple, solid. Emotion rating, steady. She did something she hadn't done in months. She Googled prop firm evaluations under $50. The screen flooded with options. Most were scams. A few legit. She bookmarked one with clean reviews, a modest challenge. $10,000 demo account. 5% profit target. 5% max drawdown. No time limit. Entry fee, $47. She stared at her account balance. $39.84. A long silence followed, until AU wandered into the room, half asleep, dragging her pillow. "Ma, your eyes are glowing again." Dewi smiled. "It's just the laptop, Sion." "No," AU said, curling up beside her. "It's not that kind of glow." The next morning, Dewi did what she swore she'd never do. She messaged a cousin she hadn't spoken to in over a year. "I'm not asking for charity," she wrote. "Just a loan, $10. I'll repay you within 2 weeks. I promise." There was no reply for 5 hours. Then, without a word, the money landed in her digital wallet. She bought the evaluation, opened her MetaTrader, and stared at the empty chart like a woman standing at the edge of a diving board. No one could jump for her, so she did. The next day, the first trade was placed. Australian dollar to US dollar, bullish flag breakout. 0.5% risk. Solid RR. It hit target in 32 minutes. Plus $150 simulated profit. She closed her eyes. Not to celebrate, but to breathe. Because this wasn't the win. This was the start of a deeper war. Not against the market, but against every part of her that still whispered, "You're just a village woman. What are you doing here?" The second trade nearly broke her. It was a textbook setup. Dewi had mapped it the night before with obsessive clarity. US dollar to Swiss franc. False breakout at previous high. Bearish engulfing on the 15-minute, confirmed by divergence on RSI. It was perfect. Perfect in the way nature sometimes tempts you before a storm. She entered short at 0.9094, stop at 0.9110, target at 0.9050. She risked 0.8% of the simulated balance. Conservative, measured. Then, the market danced. It dropped quickly, immediately in her favor. Plus 15 pips in under 10 minutes. She leaned back, hand hovering over the mouse. Not to close, but to breathe. She had told herself she wouldn't micromanage. Trust the setup. Trust the data. Trust the discipline. Then it retraced. Slowly at first. Then sharply, reclaiming all the profit. Then a wick, long and cruel, pierced her stop like a needle in skin. Trade closed, minus $80. It wasn't the money. It was the voice that came with the loss. You should have closed at plus 15. You saw the bounce. Why didn't you exit? You could have been up. She sat still, fists clenched on her knees, trying to override the voice with something stronger. But the whisper was persistent. That night, she didn't journal the trade immediately. She stared at the blinking cursor on her spreadsheet and said aloud, "Not yet." Instead, she turned off the laptop and opened the door. The night air was wet and buzzing. Crickets sang. A distant motorbike revved and faded. The village slept. But inside her, a storm had started to gather. The next morning, she made Ayu's breakfast on autopilot. Nasi uduk, egg, krupuk. The taste was right, but her mind wasn't present. Even when Ayu hugged her before leaving for school, Dewi didn't fully return to the room. She was still on the chart, still in the loss. Later that afternoon, as the house stood quiet and the dishes were clean, she sat back down. She reopened the spreadsheet. She forced herself to fill every cell. Pair, entry, exit, setup rationale, execution rating, emotion rating, mistake, none, just market dynamics. Final comment, I followed my rules. That's the win. She saved the file, closed the sheet, and wrote one line in a sticky note she taped next to her screen. Your worth is not in any single candle. The next few trades were quiet. Modest wins. One small loss. Nothing remarkable, but Dewi was proud of the way she managed them. She journaled like a monk, woke like clockwork, reviewed each night's Asian session as if deciphering scripture. Her trading wasn't perfect, but it was consistent. Until part 5 of the evaluation came. Trade number 7. The setup wasn't clean. US dollar to Japanese yen was ranging. No volume. No clear bias. She knew better. Every part of her experience said, wait. Sit down. Observe. But something shifted. It wasn't greed. It wasn't desperation. It was fatigue. Fatigue that sounded like logic. It might break. If it does, you'll be early. If you don't trade, you're wasting time. It's just a small risk. She clicked. Entered long. Almost immediately, it reversed. Spike. Stop. Done. Minus $97. And this time, something broke. Not loudly. Not visibly. But internally, a thread snapped. She slammed the laptop shut. Cursed softly under her breath. Ayu heard from the other room and came running. Ma? Did something happen? Dewi swallowed her shame. No, Siam. Just a wrong click. That night, she didn't open the charts. She didn't journal. She didn't review setups. She lay on her back, staring at the cracked ceiling, thinking about quitting. Not trading. Not the dream. But the challenge. Maybe she wasn't ready. Maybe the prop firm pressure was too much. Maybe she was kidding herself. After all, who was she? A woman with no mentors. No money. No community. Just candlestick drawings on a school notebook and borrowed time. Then, just before sleep took her, she remembered Elijah. She opened her phone. Typed slowly. Made a mistake. Forced a setup. Broke my rule. Need to walk away for 24 hours. The reply came 3 minutes later. You didn't fail. You bled honestly. That matters. Now log it. Then rest. She wept, not because she lost, but because for the first time, someone understood the language of her silence. And so, she picked up the journal and wrote. Dewi gave herself exactly 24 hours. She didn't open the laptop. She didn't touch the journal. She didn't check her phone except to respond to AU's school group chat and read Elijah's brief, steadying messages. Instead, she cleaned the entire house with a quiet violence, scrubbing floors, shaking out bedsheets, hand-washing the curtains she'd ignored for months. She cooked slow food, chicken porridge, fresh sambal, sautéed vegetables the old way. She sat with AU during homework instead of glancing over her shoulder with half a mind on market structure. And when the sun dipped low and the village lights flickered on one by one like faint stars, she did something she hadn't done in over a year. She prayed, not out loud, not with any ritual, just closed eyes and a breath so long it trembled in her chest. Not asking for success, not even asking for strength, just to return. When she opened her laptop the next morning, something was different. She didn't feel pressure. She didn't feel hunger. She felt clarity. The evaluation account still had room. She had 5 days left until she hit the drawdown limit. If she traded well, just 3 solid wins, she could finish. Not heroically, not spectacularly, but with purpose. She chose her pair carefully. Pound sterling to US dollar had a clean trend line on the H1. Price had rejected the 1.2710 level 3 times. It was consolidating under resistance, forming a wedge. A break was likely, and if it happened with volume, it could run. She marked it, waited. London Open came. Price tested the trend line. Rejected. She waited. 15 minutes later, a bullish engulfing candle broke structure with volume. She entered long. Stop, tight. Target, 2 times risk. This time, she didn't watch. She set an alert. Made tea. Helped AU draw a giraffe. When the alert dinged, it was done. Plus $2.30 simulated. She logged it. Next trade came the following night. Australian dollar to Canadian dollar, post-news retracement. Clean Fibonacci bounce. RSI divergence. Structure shift. Long again. Plus $1.98. She breathed. No celebration. No fear. Just momentum. But not in price, in her mind. 2 days left. 1 trade needed. She didn't force it. She waited. The market tempted her. Noisy candles, uncertain patterns. But she had learned. Discipline isn't what you do when it's easy. It's what you do when everything whispers. Just this once. The setup arrived on gold. XAU/USD. She had avoided gold until now. Too volatile, too erratic. But this was different. It had formed a double bottom on the H1, confirmed by a strong engulfing candle at the neckline. Volume was building. Correlated pairs confirmed the bias. She placed the trade. Smaller lot. Slightly wider stop. Then, she turned off the screen. Yes, off. She had planned the trade. Now she would let it play. She went to the market. Bought AU a used pink backpack she'd seen for weeks. Cooked fried banana and hot chocolate. Laughed when AU spilled sugar all over the table. When she returned home, she opened the laptop. Plus $2.66. The dashboard refreshed. Challenge complete. Evaluation passed. Account funded. She stared, not in disbelief, in stillness. This was what she'd promised herself. Not overnight riches, not YouTube dreams, just proof that it was possible. The next morning, Elijah wrote again. You did it. I never doubted you. Now, are you ready for something more? She paused, typed back, define more. 5 minutes later, her phone vibrated. A link, an invite to a private group. Small, vetted, women traders only. From Brazil, South Africa, the Philippines, Nigeria, Jordan, Ukraine, each one with their own story, each one walking the same tightrope between reality and ambition. Elijah had made introductions. Now it was up to her. Dewi looked at the screen, then at AU, who was brushing her doll's hair, singing softly to herself. She joined the group, and her world opened. It was the silence that struck her first. Not the absence of noise, but the kind of digital silence that hides behind profile icons and time zones. A strange, floating limbo where you knew dozens of minds were watching the same charts, but no one felt the need to prove anything. The group Elijah had added her to wasn't a cheerleading squad or a meme-sharing circus. These women were precise, respectful, and devastatingly sharp. The first message she read after joining was from Alejandra, a Chilean day trader who had posted 3 annotated screenshots of euro to Japanese yen trades with so much technical clarity it made Dewi sit up straighter. New break of structure on 15M. Waited for liquidity sweep before entry. Left shoulder reaction as expected. Took partials at R1. The caption read, "No hype. No emojis. Just logic." Then came Reem from Jordan, who added a one-line critique. Clean. Watch that imbalance zone at 157.620 next time. Dewi hovered over the like button but didn't click. She wasn't ready to be seen just yet. Instead, she watched. For days. She read everything. Trade recaps, psychological notes, weekend homework sessions where charts were dissected and rebuilds proposed. She felt like she'd stumbled into a secret dojo where each trader wielded her chart like a blade, silent and deadly. Eventually, she introduced herself. Just a short message. Dewi, Indonesia, new funded trader. Quiet but disciplined. Mostly London session, small account. Glad to be here. She expected polite silence. Instead, a storm of hearts. Then a reply from someone named Thandi in South Africa. "Welcome, sister. You're among killers now. Let's eat." And so began the real training. Elijah stepped back. His role was never to lead, just to connect. The women took over. Each had her strength. Bianca from Lagos was the queen of gold scalps. Fatme from Tehran specialized in oil. June from Manila was ruthless with DXY correlations. Dewi began to soak in their styles, analyze their logic, question her own systems. And then came her first real funded trade. A live account. Her capital, $10,000. Her daily risk cap, 1%. Max drawdown allowed, $500. She had waited for this moment for 2 years, and when it finally came, it felt small, quiet. No fanfare, no tears. Just her, the screen, and a blinking price feed. She chose euro to US dollar, a pair she'd studied to the bone. Price had faked below a 4-hour support zone. Wick rejection, strong bullish candle. She waited for the 15-minute confirmation. Got it. She didn't hesitate. Long at 1.0772. Stop, 1.0759. Target, 1.0815. Risk, 1%. As the candle danced, her hands didn't tremble. Her heart did not race. She had been here before. In silence, in sweat, in notebooks and demo accounts, and 2 a.m. battles with herself. This was familiar. The trade ran fast. Hit target in 22 minutes. $430. She exhaled slowly, not because of the win, but because of what she didn't do. Overtrade, over-leverage, or second-guess. She had executed like a professional. She posted the trade recap in the group. The chart, the logic, the emotion rating, the risk note. A few likes. One clap emoji. No overreaction. Then Bianca replied, "You belong here." Dewi smiled. The next few weeks became a rhythm. Trade, review, share, improve. She lost sometimes. Of course she did. She once clipped a gold scalp that reversed instantly and cost her $230. She logged it. No panic, no spiral, just data. And then the email came from the prop firm. They'd noticed her consistency, her logs, her steadiness. They were launching a mentorship program for women in emerging markets. She had been shortlisted. Would she be interested? The screen blurred as her eyes filled. She clicked reply. Yes. Always yes. She didn't tell anyone at first. Not even AU. The email from the prop firm sat in her inbox like a fragile egg. Too precious to touch. Too new to trust. For 2 days, Dewi read it over and over, tracing every word with a caution that bordered on superstition. We are inviting you to become a founding mentor in our Women Who Chart initiative. Your discipline and journaling style reflect exactly the kind of trader we want others to learn from. Her? A mentor? She still washed rice by hand and stretched the internet bill one day past the cutoff. Her charting tools were a secondhand laptop and a roll of masking tape to mark key zones on the desk. What could she possibly offer? But a voice inside whispered, "You didn't trade your way out of poverty just to stay invisible." She replied yes. The onboarding process was brief but intense. She was introduced to the firm's internal team, sharp women with clipped British accents and calendars that overflowed with terms like impact roundtables, and female-first equity access. Dewi understood maybe 60% of it, but she nodded, smiled, and took notes with a fervor that matched any market session. Her role would be simple: host one live journal review per week with new female traders from Southeast Asia. No teaching, no theory, just walking them through her own logs, showing the process behind the process. They wanted rawness, realness, and Dewi had that in abundance. Her first session was terrifying. She wore a hijab she hadn't touched in months and positioned the camera to crop out the peeling paint behind her. 5 women joined: a young single mom from Cebu, a college dropout from Bangkok, an accountant in Ho Chi Minh City moonlighting as a scalper. They watched silently as Dewi shared her screen and began narrating her trades. At first, her voice shook, not from fear, but from the sheer foreignness of being listened to. But then she settled. She walked them through a GBP/NZD loss, explaining how she had misread liquidity. She showed her written notes, her rating scale, the post-trade reflection. She didn't glamorize anything. She didn't perform. When she finished, there was a long silence. Then the girl from Cebu unmuted and said quietly, "I thought I had to be perfect to be taken seriously." Dewi smiled, voice still soft, but now unwavering. Perfection doesn't make profit. Consistency does. From there, it snowballed. Word spread. The firm clipped segments of her session and posted them online. Her blog, once anonymous, began seeing traffic, followers, comments, then emails, dozens, from women who saw themselves in her story. Overworked, underpaid, invisible, but fiercely intelligent. She was no longer alone. And that's when it happened. The worst drawdown of her trading life. It started with overconfidence. After a string of 4 high-R wins, Dewi let her guard down. She skipped journaling for 2 nights. She ignored an economic calendar alert, Canadian CPI news, assuming her Australian dollar to Canadian dollar scalp would finish early. It didn't. Price reversed violently just as she stepped away to boil water. By the time she returned, she was down minus $320. She froze. A voice inside screamed, "Close it now. Get out. Cut the loss." But another whispered, "Wait. It's retracing. It'll come back." She did neither. She hesitated. The trade dropped further. She finally closed at minus $473. Her breathing was shallow, the screen blurry. She stared at the number, $473.09, and the cold reality gripped her chest. She had $26 left before breaching her funded drawdown limit. One more mistake, and it was over. She sat in the dark for hours, unable to speak. Ayu called to her. She didn't answer. She had taught others to control risk, to respect the plan, to journal the pain. Now, here she was, staring at the edge. At 3:40 a.m., she opened her journal, wrote every detail. Pair, setup, mistake, emotional state, ignored calendar, overconfidence, lack of stop adjustment. Then she wrote a single sentence. "If I survive this, I'll never skip the process again." The day after the drawdown, Dewi did not trade. It wasn't fear that held her back, it was reverence. A quiet mourning for the part of her that had flirted with recklessness. She treated the mistake not as a failure, but as a funeral. She buried the ego that told her she was invincible, laid it to rest beneath a new rule written in red ink and taped to the edge of her monitor. "No candle is worth your career." That morning, she told Ayu they wouldn't buy sweetened condensed milk this week. Ayu asked why. Dewi said gently, "We're in risk management mode." The child nodded solemnly, as if understanding something far bigger than her years allowed. Dewi returned to the charts that night with gloves on, not literal ones, but the mental gloves of a fighter coming back from a knockout. She reviewed 2 weeks' worth of trades. She color-coded each mistake. She double-checked her economic calendar and even printed a hard copy to tape beside her journal. This wasn't trading anymore. This was atonement. She made herself a promise. 3 trades, maximum precision, all or nothing. If she failed, she'd walk away and rebuild from scratch. But she would not die slow. She would either redeem the account or exit with dignity. The first trade was a rejection of pound sterling to US dollar at 1.2750, a level she had tested on demo accounts for months. Breakout, retest, entry, stop tight, R of 3:1. She watched price flirt with her entry for an hour, then slowly climb. It hit target. plus $78. Not much, but she had fought for every pip. The second came 2 nights later, XAU/USD during New York session open. Classic impulsive retracement, tapped into an imbalanced zone she'd marked 2 days earlier. This time, she sized down further. Only $42 gained. But her confidence began to return. The group noticed she'd gone quiet. Reem messaged her privately, "You're okay?" Dewi replied with her screenshot. Clawing back, Reem replied, "You're the most disciplined among us." Finish the climb. And so, she prepared for the third trade, the final move to escape the shadow of the drawdown. She waited 5 days. 5 days of no action, of watching, planning, rehearsing in her head. The group buzzed with activity. Junior traders posting their wins, Bianca catching a wild scalp on US 30, but Dewi sat back like a sniper with no finger on the trigger. The setup came on Euro to Australian dollar. It wasn't obvious. In fact, most people missed it. But Dewi didn't trade the way most people did. She saw it forming on the 4H, a quiet, compressed channel, hints of accumulation, and a deceptive bearish engulfing candle that faked out weak sellers. On the 15-minute, a spring. Liquidity sweep. One final stab down, then rejection. Her plan locked into place. She entered at 1.6161. Long. Stop. 1.6145. Target. 1.6205. It ran slow. 2 hours. Then 3. Almost hit stop. Then it flipped. Momentum surged. The candle pushed. Take profit hit. Plus $123. And just like that, she had done it. Recovered the entire drawdown. Balance, intact. Account, alive. She stared at the screen. Not with excitement. With something deeper. Stillness. She didn't scream. Didn't post a victory message in the group. She didn't even smile. She simply closed the chart. Then opened her notebook. Wrote, "This market doesn't care where you live, what you wear, or how loud your house is. It cares if you can outweigh your ego. Today I did." The next mentorship call, she spoke about the drawdown. Openly. Bluntly. She didn't hide the shame, or the fear, or the sheer nausea of nearly blowing the opportunity. She showed screenshots. She read from her own emotional journal. She told the 5 women watching that discipline was not about always winning. It was about how you lose. When she finished, the room was quiet. Then the woman from Bangkok whispered, "I thought I had to be strong all the time." Dewi answered, "No. You have to be consistent. Strength comes after." The first time Dewi saw her own face on a Zoom poster, she froze. There it was, her name spelled correctly, her country listed under her title, and her face, modest but radiant, next to the words, "Discipline over drama, how one mother built a trading life before sunrise." The firm was launching its Southeast Asia Empowerment Series, and they'd chosen her. Her, Dewi from West Java, the woman who used to serve rice in a plastic bowl for 60 cents an hour, as the keynote speaker for the opening week. She wanted to say no. She almost did. Public speaking was never part of the plan. The thought of hundreds of strangers staring at her, judging her accent, her headscarf, her patched-up wallpaper, it made her stomach turn. But then AU came home that night with a drawing in hand. A simple crayon sketch. 2 stick figures. One bigger, with a chart in the background. One smaller, holding a backpack. A sun above them. Underneath, written in bold, jagged English letters, "My MOM is a Forexer." Dewi didn't laugh. She cried. Quietly. Gratefully. Because it wasn't about her anymore. So when the night came, she wore the same pale blue jilbab she had once used for funerals. It felt right. Somehow, a symbol of things ending and beginning again. She angled the camera to crop out the peeling paint, positioned her desk lamp to reduce the shadow across her cheek, and clicked Join Meeting. 321 participants, all muted, all watching, and she spoke, not as an expert, not as a hero, but as a woman who had survived. She told them about the war on, about the secondhand laptop, about her first $2 win, about the $473 loss, about the loneliness, and the forums filled with men telling her to go back to cooking. She spoke in the rhythm of her life, halting, imperfect, honest. She showed them her journals, her red ink, her process, and when someone asked, "What was your biggest breakthrough?" she didn't hesitate. "It wasn't a trade," she said softly. "It was the moment I realized I didn't have to trade like anyone else. I only had to trade like me." After the webinar ended, her inbox exploded. dozens of messages. Women asking to join the group. Mothers thanking her for making them believe again. A woman in Surabaya even offered to send her an old office chair, because you shouldn't have to sit on a wooden stool to change your life. But the real surprise came 1 week later. An email from the firm's Southeast Asia regional director. They were building a physical training center in Jakarta, an incubator for underrepresented traders. Sponsored desks, free mentoring, internet access, even childcare. Would Dewi like to head the women's desk? She blinked. Read the email again. And again. Then she stood up, walked to the kitchen where Ayu was eating cornflakes, and said, "Sayang, how would you like to live in Jakarta?" Ayu stared at her. "Is that where real traders live?" Dewi laughed. "No, real traders live anywhere. But this time, they're calling us." 3 weeks later, they packed everything. Just 2 bags, her journal, and a USB with every trade she'd ever logged. Elijah sent her a gift, a keyboard, and a new mouse. Bianca sent a headset. The group held a Zoom call to say goodbye, though they all knew it wasn't a goodbye. In Jakarta, the training center was modest, but real. Desks, screens, air conditioning, a tiny fridge, a prayer room, and on the wall, near the front entrance, a printed quote in bold, black font. "You don't need capital to start. You need conviction to survive." Dewi. She stared at it the first morning, long and hard. Then she sat at her new desk, opened her new account, and traded. Not for glory, not even for money, but for the hundreds of women who would walk through that door next, who needed proof that success doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it whispers from a back room at 3 a.m. If Dewi's journey moved you, if you saw even a sliver of your own struggle in her quiet victories and sleepless nights, then don't let her story fade here. Hit like to honor every mother who dared to dream between shifts. Subscribe to never miss another raw, real trader's journey. And drop a comment below. Whether you're a beginner, a veteran, or still waiting to take your first trade, your story matters. Let's build this community, candle by candle. This is Forex Success Story, where every pip is personal,